Hello students, welcome to the Analyst dated 26th of October 2023. Today we'll look at 5 important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. The first article will be regarding solar energy, which is part of the renewable energy transition. Then we'll look at narco terrorism, and it is connecting essentially narcotics with terrorism. Then we'll look at some places in news. First, we look at Mediterranean Sea, then Red Sea, then Gulf of Aden, then Suez Canal, then Gulf of Aqaba, then Sinai Peninsula, and finally, we look at the Gaza Strip, Golan Heights, as well as the West Bank. Let's start with the first article, which is related to solar energy. Now, here, the International Solar Alliance is to release a report on global adoption of solar technology in November. This pertains to our renewable energy transition, which is extremely pertinent. Why? Because the world is facing with some global common issues like climate change. And to combat climate change, we are moving away from carbon intensive energy towards less carbon and eventually zero carbon. So we need to transition from our usual sources like, let's say, coal, all types of fossil fuel, and we are moving towards what? We are moving towards solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, and newer forms of energy like the green hydrogen transition. So this solar energy now becomes an important part, important fulcrum of the future of India's energy mix. And to simply say, what do I mean by energy mix? So let's say I have 100 rupees. I have simple 100 rupees. And how will I allocate this 100 rupees? How will I budget my energy? So what part of energy, let's say 50 is coming from renewable energy, and let's say 50 is coming from other sources. So this is essentially called the energy mix. So how India will reach to its destined energy mix, and this process of, let's say, going from 10% of renewable energy at some point of time towards, let's say, 50% of renewable energy in our energy mix, this process itself is called the energy transition. And that is why a question on solar energy or renewable energy is most probable whenever we are talking about our energy transitions. Now let's understand the solar potential of India. So we must appreciate that geographically we are located in the tropics. And when I say tropics, I also mean to say that we have regions like Marustali, that is the Thar Desert. Then we have tropical, subtropical region, and we are bounded by the Himalayas, which makes India a hospitable country. But simultaneously making it hospitable, we are also getting our solar potential, and the max solar potential that India can achieve is approximately 750 gigawatt of energy. Now, to put this in perspective, today the total energy that India produces is approximately 400 gigawatt. That means if we only use solar energy and we utilize our true potential, and if we utilize the wastelands that we have in India, which is 3% of the total land. So if we use the 3% of India's land, we'll get 750 gigawatt of energy. And we are tapping on this solar energy for our energy transition. What type of energy transition? Renewable energy transition. To combat what? To combat climate change. To combat what? Global warming. To combat greenhouse gases. To combat air pollution. So all around what we are seeing in our urban areas, in our rural hinterland, the issues of climate change, how it is leading to incessant rainfall, how it is affecting the cropping patterns, how it is affecting farming practices, how it is affecting life and livelihood. All of that is now hinged on the transition, on all types of mitigating measures that as a state or as a government or as state governments or as local governments, all these state organs have to take. and solar energy is part of that transition. Now, looking at targets, we are looking at 50% of India's total energy coming through renewable energy. And this is part of the Panchamrita goals that the Prime Minister gave during the COP26 in Glasgow. So Panchamrita goals is about India's NDCs, nationally determined goals towards fighting off climate change. Now, what is the solar energy target? So it was 100 gigawatt till 2022. Now it has been revised to 300 gigawatt till 2030. Now we must appreciate at this point of time that there is always a split in this 100 gigawatt, and this split is about 60 coming from, let's say, the solar plants, and the 40 is coming from rooftop solar. And here we are essentially converting the thermal energy through photovoltaic cell towards electricity. Now, the earlier issue with solar energy was about the storage and about the grid connectivity. Now, over the period of time, what we are doing is we are trying to find a sustainable grid mix. That simply means that I will have multiple sources of power. Let's say I have coal, I have, let's say, gas powered power plant, then I have thermal, then I have nuclear, then I have solar, and I also have wind and many other sources. Now all of them will not work simultaneously. I will have to find my, let's say, peak demand. Let's say there are 2-day peaks, and on those peaks I have to find a dedicated mix so that I am able to meet this peak. But the issue with solar is that solar is coming mostly in the mornings, and there is a sudden dip. That simply means that today solar energy cannot work on its own. It cannot work as a solo source of energy. Therefore, we are also looking at solar plus wind. So we are going for hybrid plants also. We are going for solar energy in micro scale as well as we are going for mega scale. The way we were going for ultra mega thermal power plants, today we are going for plants like Bhadala in Rajasthan. Now today we are ranking 4th in the world in terms of production. So targets are 100, but we are standing at 67. And one of the reason of this performance is the COVID shock that we had. Else it was positioned at approximately 80 to 81. We would have reached 81 gigawatt by now if there was no COVID. Now let's look at the energy mix and how we have transitioned. So what do we see in this pie? That this part of the pie will gradually increase. And given that India is situated in such a sweet spot, that is tropical, subtropical, then Tropic of Cancer passing through it, that is why we are also promoting the International Solar Alliance. Why? We require a lot of technology. We require the critical technology. We require the critical inputs. We require the critical minerals. Therefore, we have launched schemes like production linked incentive because we want to domestically manufacture high efficiency photovoltaic cells in India itself, and which is also part of the Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, what are the benefits? So benefits are very simple, that it is a renewable. That means all you have to do is create a plant, and then you have to run the plant and you have to maintain the plant. For a daily basis, let's say I am operating a thermal power plant, I would definitely require more and more coal. Let's say I have to import coal. I have to import coking coal from, let's say, the Carmichael coals of Australia. So all of that I will not do whenever I have solar power plant. I will do only repair, maintenance, and I will run the plant. So why? Because the source of energy is renewable. Then naturally, if I am going for clean and green energy, will I not get more and more financial aid, whether it is the state government, whether it is the central government, or whether it is global financial institutions, for example, World Bank. So these global financial institutions, they will fund me. Why? Because I am going towards green energy. I am fighting against climate change. Then it is extremely reliable. Now this reliability has increased over the period of time. Why? Because of technology. So earlier we were thinking that we will try to store the solar energy using battery. Now what we are doing instead is we are making smart grids, which is based upon artificial intelligence. Essentially, we will predict based upon data that what will be the demand at a particular point of time in the day or in a particular month. So we'll have a range of what will be the demand, let's say at 8 p.m. tomorrow. So based upon that demand, I will switch on or switch off various sources of power that I have, and I will connect all those sources of power to the national power grid. So today we have a national power grid crisscrossing the span of India, which was earlier not there. That means working on transmission, working on grid connectivity, working on grid connectivity of renewable energy, particularly solar energy, has given us the potential to now seamlessly and to tap and use solar energy rather than to store it. Then if we want to further store it, today we also have the potential of converting our solar energy into hydrogen. How? Because using solar energy, I will go for electrolysis of H2O and I will get H2, that is green hydrogen. So can I store this hydrogen? Yes, absolutely. Can this be used in buses? Maybe in cars also? Yes. So if I am not able to store it in batteries, but can I convert this into a new form of energy? Yes, very well. Now, most important is that this is extremely decentralized. Now, let's appreciate a point that let's say there is a single power plant in India. Let's say there is a single power plant in India. Now, this single power plant, let's say, is on the Gujarat coast or the Maharashtra coast. Now, to transmit this energy to Leh and Ladakh will require going through treacherous terrain. I have to cross the Dhauladhar, I have to cross the Pir Panjal range. Now, why would I do that? What is the need to go there? Taking all the electricity transmission lines, and we highly appreciate that these regions have very difficult terrains. It is very difficult to even construct roads to create these linear infrastructure. So can I not go for a decentralized model? Can I not have my Leh airport powered by solar energy itself? It is at a higher altitude. It will have rarer atmosphere. It is getting sunlight. Why can't I use it? Naturally. Then, should I transport the electricity? Let's say if the electricity is being produced in, let's say, Bundelkhand. From Bundelkhand, should I run my electricity all the way to, let's say, Marustali? Or can I create my decentralized model in Jaisalmer itself? So that is the idea of solar energy. So if you can tap and use, and if you have a decentralized network, so what happens is we have the option of having a grid. Simultaneously, we will have some difficult areas which can be independent on their own source of electricity, energy. And this is also true when we are looking at water, when we are looking at any kind of supply. If it is very difficult to supply something from this point to this point, why? Because there is a barrier of nature. Then what would I do? Then I would go for decentralized grid. Let's say I have an island, I have another island. So I would go for decentralized grids. Now, what are the challenges? So primary challenges are that solar energy is becoming extremely cheaper. And this cheap solar energy, it is difficult to sustain. Because of excessive competition and the Chinese dumping of inputs, what has happened, that the overall cost of creating a solar power plant has decreased substantially. And that is why solar energy has become extremely cheaper. But is it sustainable to go for 2.25 rupees per unit of electricity on solar? The answer is no. So one is that issue. Then we are highly import dependent. And when we are talking about import dependency, the idea of International Solar Alliance was to get not only technology but also to get the funds and to decrease the royalties that we pay. The royalties that we have to pay to the patent holders of these sensitive and critical technologies and these dual use technologies. And therefore, the input cost has to decrease, and that is one of the challenge, that the input cost is high whenever we are talking, and whatever input cost we are giving, it is usually being given to some foreign companies. So lack of domestic players. Then the high initial cost, this is the gestation cost. So the gestation period is smaller, but the initial cost is lower. Then the issue of intermittent supply that we have discussed, that we will have good solar supply and suddenly it will drop the moment we do not have sun. And that is why to sustain solar, we need a similar supply which can switch on as the solar switches off, right? Then the idea of land availability. Now, whenever we are talking about solar energy, the issue is that we are going for horizontal use of space. And what can be the solution? So some solutions in the form of rooftop solar, then the idea of solar trees, then going for more vertical models using the vertical walls with PVs. But eventually, if we are going for a power plant, then we have to go for dual use of land. And one good example of using solar energy in dual use is mixing, let's say, cropping plus solar energy. And whenever we are using, let's say, roof, so we are using rooftop plus we are having, that is our living area. So home plus, so we have to go for dual use of this horizontal land. Why? Because we hold 18% of the world's population and 2.5% of world's land, and therefore we must look at dual use. Now, the initiatives, the government initiatives form in form of the National Solar Mission with the targets. Then we have the production link incentive. This is to incentivize production in an incremental value to go for high efficiency solar PV modules. Then going for solar parks, going for ultra mega solar parks, then even going for hybrid models of wind plus solar, or going for offshore solar. Then promoting one sun, one world, one grid to get more fund, to get more technology, and to get a global grid, or let's say a regional grid. Why? Because the sun never sleeps. So if I am looking horizontally, here is sun. After a few hours, the sun will be here. So if I have a continuous grid and let's say India is in between, then what happens? That when here we have electricity, we can supply it to India. When it is on India, it can supply it to both the countries. And when it is here, it can again supply back. So we can have energy sharing agreements on the basis of this. Then we are going for off-grid solar pumps. But again, these pumps have some different ramifications. Why? Because pumps end of the day will lead to groundwater exhaustion. Now, what's the way forward? So we have to increase investment in renewable energy infrastructure and promote the private players along with our startups to come out with various models including reverse engineering to finally replace the dumped PV modules that we are getting from China. Then we have to work on energy storage also, and we have to adopt AI based smart grids. And we also require this skilled workforce which can later on work in other countries also. Why? Because other countries will also move towards a solar transition. Let's look at narco terrorism. Now, this is part of our GS3 internal security, and at this juncture, we must note down that this is the golden crescent and this is the golden triangle. And somehow, India is positioned in between the golden crescent and the golden triangle. Now, in a layman manner, if let's say this is a drug region, what will happen? And this is, let's say, a drug-free region. Then what will happen? Naturally, there will be some flows from drug areas towards non-drug areas. There will be some movement of drugs from this supply to this demand region. And India is getting trapped into this region. Now let's understand how narco terrorism is affecting India. So whenever we are looking at, let's say, trafficking. So whenever we are looking at trafficking of drugs, it is about the demand of, let's say, youth, of, let's say, some festivals, of, let's say, some music parties. So these drugs are consumed globally. Now, this is a very simple affair where drug is being peddled, drug is being trafficked into a country. It is coming in because there is some demand. It is coming from a supply region to a demand region. Fine. But let's say the proceed of this crime. So it is naturally a crime, drug trafficking. And it is prosecuted under the NDPS Act. Now, if you are doing drug trafficking, that is fine. You are to be prosecuted under NDPS. But let's say let's say you earn 1 crore from this proceeds of this illegal crime. Now, after 1 crore, what you do is you use this 1 crore to fund, let's say, a bombing. That is essentially narco terrorism. Whenever you are using the proceeds of crime, and in this particular case, the crime is drug trafficking, somehow related to drug trade, which is naturally illegal. It is globally illegal. So whenever you are going for this illegal trade and you are using it to fund terrorism, you are essentially going for narco terrorism. Now, this is a pattern that was seen by the US, and this is particularly the issue that was dealt by DEA. Now, DEA was worried about the rebels in countries like Colombia and Peru, where they were using drug, let's say coke or cocaine, to sell it into US through, let's say, Central America, through Mexico, porous borders, and then whatever the proceeds of crime was going back to Peru and Colombia to fund these cartels which were going for terrorist activities, rebel activities, and therefore this term was coined, narco terrorism. Now, when we were discussing terrorism, what do we mean? We are essentially meaning that there is some amount of fear, there is some amount of use of violence. If I am using violence, if I am instilling fear in others by some violent acts, why? To get some coercive action, to make the state go for a coercive action, and to promote subversive activities against the state. Overall, what happens after terrorism? We are terrified, we are fearful, people are scared, and in that scared state of mind, we take wrong decisions. The state also takes wrong decisions. The state also spends what it should not do, right? So that is the idea of terrorism. And linking this narcotics, the trade route that we discussed, the golden crescent and the golden triangle, we are trapped in a region where we can become the next victim of narco terrorism. And it would be not wrong to say that some of India's states are directly suffering from this narco terrorism. And this was also a pattern that was followed in Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, after the invasion in 1978, the Soviet invasion, what happened is that any invasion, if I am going for any invasion, it has to become a self-sustaining rebel movement. Now, first I will give you the arms. First I am giving you the cash of arms, all the dollars. I'm supplying everything, all the logistics. But over the period of time, you will have to self-sustain, because no country on this earth can continuously pump in billions of dollars. Can US pump Ukraine with billions of dollars continuously for the next 20, 30 years? Absolutely not. It withdrew from Afghanistan. So we have to understand that somehow, if I am giving you the first tranche of payment, I am buying the leaders, I am making people rebel, I am brainwashing, I am using indoctrination, I am giving arms, then I have to create a business model. So this business model is very simple, that I am also promoting some, let's say, poppy cultivation, some cannabis, and again pumping this poppy and cannabis to a country like, let's say, US or to Western Europe. Now, if I am pumping drugs into Western countries, what will happen? The youth will be subverted over the period of time. There will be more drug addiction. So, it will decrease the national will, the quality of people. The people will become drug addicts. Now, this is happening, but I want dollars also. So, what I'll get? The dollars will be again brought back, and it will further support my, let's say, actions. And this happened in Taliban. So, any good quality heroin, poppy cultivation that we are going for is originating, let's say, in Afghanistan, going towards Iran or going towards Pakistan. Then from there, it is being exported to different countries, being processed. Why? Because it is one of the finest organic content that we are getting of drugs. Why? Because there are two types of drugs. We have synthetic drugs, and then we have the drugs which are cultivated. So whenever we are talking about cultivated drugs, Afghanistan is one of the finest regions. Similarly, it goes for Colombia. So these are some of the regions from where drugs originate. But what are the destinations? So destination are high value market. So the moment India increases in its size in terms of economy, we are going towards 5 trillion, from 3 trillion, we are going towards 10 trillion. So what will happen? Eventually people will have higher paying capacity, higher spending capacity. Now, if I somehow go for more and more pumping of drugs in the society, then what will happen? The overall youth will derail from the main line. And this can be seen that whenever we are looking at the border areas, when we are looking at Northeast in terms of injectable drugs, which is also leading to the menace of AIDS, or we are looking at our friendly neighbor and our friendly player along with the champion. So we are referring to Pakistan and China. So all the CPEC, all the investment going into CPEC will finally be utilized for promoting more terrorism, promoting more violence in this region. And to make it self-sustainable, what I'll require more and more poppy cultivation, not only in Pakistan, but also in Afghanistan. So I want to run more terrorist activities. So what I'll do is, I'll get some poppy from Afghanistan, get it from Pakistan, and pump it into the borders of, let's say, Punjab, or let's say porous borders of Rajasthan, or the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, over the period of time, what will happen? That I will have, let's say, this is a box, and in this box, I am sending drug here, I am sending drug here, I am sending drug here. Here it is coming from Golden Triangle, here it is coming from Golden Crescent. Let's say this is our Punjab borders, and this is, let's say, Gujarat and Maharashtra borders. Now, what will happen over the period of time? That these are urban areas, and as India is urbanizing, let's say new urban centers are coming. So what will happen? These urban centers will start having the demand of these drugs. So over the period of time, no part of India will be left out of this menace of drugs. And this is happening as we speak. Can we take the case study of, let's say, some tourist destination, let's say Himachal Pradesh. So Himachal Pradesh is on the periphery of Punjab. Then we have Haryana also. Then we have J&K. Now, over the period of time, what is happening is that drug was earlier being pumped into Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. And simultaneously, I am promoting here terror. And here I am promoting the Khalistani movement, the deep state of Pakistan. So, these two are continuously being pumped. Now, over the period of time, what has happened is that this chitta, so heroin is locally called chitta. This chitta is now being demanded in states like Himachal Pradesh and Haryana. And some popular destinations like Tosh, Malana and Kasol, they are now infamous for these drug related tourism and travel activities. Now, what happens over the period of time is that even if we are not, let's say this is Punjab, in Punjab, we are going for the Khalistani movement. And therefore, to sustain this Khalistani movement, we need the drug money. But what about Himachal Pradesh? So, if we are not going for any rebel movement, but we are degrading the youth. So, the youth who wanted to join the Indian army will now be going for injectable drugs. So that is a derailment of the society. Now, this AFPAC route is being exploited now through the coast also. So the Gujarat coast, where we have seized more than 10,000 crores, 10,000 kgs of, and which is running in billions of dollars. Billions of dollars of drugs has been seized. Now, simultaneously, are we also not looking at these drone shipments? So these quadcopters coming and dropping drones. Then are we not looking at these funnels, tunnels which are made along the porous riverine borders of Punjab? So these are the classic examples of this narco terrorism. The issue today is that there are newer threats like methamphetamine, that is synthetic drugs. So we are going for new forms of chemical oriented drugs. Now, let's look at the Pakistani drug syndicate. Now, we must appreciate that the deep state, that is the ISI, the army, along with the drug cartels, they work together in cahoots. And this has happened since the tenure of General Zia-ul Haq. So, they together have created a drug syndicate which is going for a self-sustaining model of promoting drug. Why? To subvert youth in India, simultaneously to run operations. What else? To then transship these drugs to other parts of India. And what is the benefit? Benefit is that I am able to support multiple things. I will have some money for, let's say, my Taliban operations. I will have some money to promote terrorism domestically. Or I may have some money to promote, let's say, terrorism in Kashmir, Khalistani movement. And I will also have some profit making. So the deep state, including the military establishment, and the political bosses, they are all in cahoots of this narco terrorism. Now, the potential is that if there is a illegal trade from one place to other place, and let's say there are multiple agents which are earning money on that side of the border, then are there chances that on this side of the border we'll also have such illegal supply chain created where people are benefiting from such illegal drug trade while the youth is subverted? The answer is yes. So naturally, when we are looking at narco terrorism, it is also related to our criminalization of politics and the politicization of criminals, and the talk of the Vohra committee whenever it was talking about the nexus between bureaucracy, between politics, between business. Now, can we say that whenever we are looking at the linkages of organized crime with terrorism, Narco terrorism is the perfect example. It is the perfect case study. And the state of drug usage in the valley, in the Kashmir valley and the Punjab are the classic examples. Similar examples is that we are pumping more and more drugs all along the northeast, in Manipur, in Nagaland, in Mizoram, through the Myanmar route, through the free movement regime. Why? Because the Kachin rebels, they want more and more money from this drug. So they are producing this drug. Now, what is the way forward of combating this narco terrorism? So we have to go for the National Action Plan for Drug Demand Reduction, where we are going for rehabilitation centers, counseling centers, then Operation Sadbhavna. Now this Sadbhavna was a de-addiction. It created de-addiction center, but this was particularly related to Jammu and Kashmir, more particularly to the Kashmir Valley. Then going for Nasha Mukt Bharat as well as Nasha Mukt J&K. Then zero tolerance policy, and to most importantly look at the trail of money laundering to target, let's say, the finance. Whatever layering has been done, how the money has been laundered, how the proceeds of crime is processed into, let's say, properties. So all of that has to be targeted by the NIA as well as the Enforcement Directorate. Then going for anti-drone technology, and this is about the technological intervention which can prevent such drone entering into and dropping the drug shipments into India. Then going for curbing of criminalization of politics in terms of going for more cleaner political representation in accordance with the Vohra Committee. And we must also look at the cross-border sharing of information. So the way we have the 5I alliance, similarly we have to create a regional alliance where we are able to share such data on drug trafficking. Let's look at the Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Now, let's start with the Mediterranean Sea. So we have to look at some pointers which can be relevant for the prelims. So here is the Bosphorus Strait. It essentially is the strait between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. And similarly, we have the Dardanelles Strait. And in between this Bosphorus Strait and the Dardanelles Strait is the Sea of Marmara. So 3 pointers here we must remember. This is Dardanelles, this is Bosphorus, and we have Sea of Marmara. Then we have the Gibraltar here. Gibraltar between Morocco and Spain. So it is essentially joining what? Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Then we have the Suez Canal here, the Gulf of Aqaba here, and this is your location of Israel. Now we must appreciate that this is part of the Atlantic Ocean and it is in between the Africa and Eurasia. Then it is bordering 21 countries. And most importantly, the Mediterranean Sea is in news because of 2 reasons. A, because there is the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then there is the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now the river Nile will also drain into the Mediterranean Sea from Egypt, and this is part of the Sinai Peninsula. Let's look at the Red Sea. So whenever we are looking at Red Sea, we have to appreciate that this part is the Sinai region. This part is the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the Gulf of Suez. Then we have a strait, very important strait with Djibouti, that is Bab al-Mandeb. And beyond the Bab al-Mandeb, we have the Gulf of Aden. And beyond Gulf of Aden, we have the Socotra, which is part of Socotra Island, which is part of Yemen. Now, these regions have been in conflict. Why? Because of the conflict in Yemen. Now, this is one of the regions which is extremely saline, and it is bordering countries like this is Egypt, then you have Sudan, then we have Eritrea, we have Djibouti, here we have Yemen, Here we have Saudi Arabia, but most importantly is your Aqaba. And in the Gulf of Aqaba, what happens is that Jordan as well as Israel will have its exit at Gulf of Aqaba, which is part of the Red Sea. And there is no major fresh water inflow, and majority of the nearby regions is deserted. Let's look at the Gulf of Aden. Now in the Gulf of Aden, we have the Strait Bab al Mandeb, and which is part of the Red Sea, and it is entering into the Arabian Sea, or part of the then Indian Ocean. And this is the island of Scotra. And this is the path which is being used for the Suez Canal shipping. Let's look at Gulf of Suez Canal, Gulf of Aqaba and Sinai Peninsula. Now, Sinai is a part of Egypt, and a part of the Sinai Peninsula has been captured by Israel, which is known as the Gaza Strip. So whenever we are looking at Gaza Strip, it is opening into two parts. One, it is opening into Israel, and second, it is opening into Egypt. But what part of Egypt? This is the peninsula. Now we must appreciate that this is also the peninsula which connects Africa with the Middle East. Now, what about the canal? So canal has been artificially created to transport, to ship it is a shipping route to avoid what? To avoid going to the Cape of Good Hope. So if we are drawing the map, so earlier we had to go all the way from here, Cape of Good Hope, all the way around Africa. Then we started going through the Suez Canal. Now Suez Canal is part of Egypt after it was nationalized. Earlier, this being a strategic route, it was being handled by French and British interests. So various companies during the colonizing time, but it was nationalized, and multiple times there has been the Suez Canal has been closed, and then there was Suez crisis also, and it was nationalized in 1956 by Nasser, who was also part of the non-alignment movement. Now it has been opened in navigation in 1975, and very recently also it closed. Why? Because ships, at times bigger ships, they get stuck, and once they are stuck, it affects the entire global supply chain. Why? Because it is the connectivity between West Europe and some exporting countries like, let's say, China, Southeast Asia, South Asia, right? So it is connecting West and East. When a ship is going through the Red Sea, it has two options. It can either take a left and enter into the Gulf of Suez. This is the Gulf of Suez, and travel through the Suez Canal and enter the Mediterranean Sea to go towards, let's say, West Europe. Or it can dock at the ports of Israel or Jordan. So this particular Gulf is called the Gulf of Aqaba. And we have two ports here. One is Eilat. Eilat is a port of Israel. So around here, we'll see that Israel and Jordan, they have their exit towards the sea. So Israel has an opening in Mediterranean Sea also, and it has opening towards Red Sea also, very strategically located. And the Al Aqaba is the Jordanian port, and Eilat is the Israeli port. And this is part of the East Africa Rift Valley system. Now we must appreciate that on one side of this Aqaba, we have the Arabian Peninsula, and on the other side we have the Sinai Peninsula. This triangle is Sinai. So this triangle is Sinai, this is Suez, and this is Aqaba. Now we are looking at the Sinai Peninsula, and if you cross the Sinai Peninsula, on one side you have Port Eilat. Here we have the Suez Canal, and at the end of Suez Canal is a very important port called the Port Said, and this is your Egypt, and this river here is Nile. Then this is Israel, and this is Jordan, and around here is your Gaza Strip. Here it is West Bank, and on top we have the Golan Heights. Let's look at Gaza Strip, Golan Heights and West Bank. Now when we are looking at Gaza Strip, we must remember that the Sinai Peninsula was in this shape, and this Sinai Peninsula is merging with Israel, and this area is the Gaza Strip. Now Gaza Strip opens into the Mediterranean Sea. However, the sea is not allowed to be accessed. Why? Because it is under Israeli occupation. Now approximately 2 million people, that is 20 lakh people, are living in this Gaza Strip, mostly Palestinians, and this was captured by Israel following the 6-day war, after which happened the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Now Israel has withdrawn from the Gaza Strip, so it is primarily occupied by Palestinians, but it is guarded from 3 sides, and it is opening its tunnels. So let's say this is a piece of land, and this land is guarded from 3 sides, and on one side Egypt is there. So Egypt has also closed its border. Why? Because there are a lot of terrorist activities here because of Hamas. So because of this security threat, what has happened, that Palestinians, they have created these tunnels, and through these tunnels they will smuggle all the goods into the Gaza Strip. Let's look at Golan Heights. Now we must appreciate that these Golan Heights was part of Syria and was captured by Israel after the 6-day war in 1967. Now Syria tried to recapture it in the Yom Kippur War, but it was unsuccessful. Now if this is the West Bank, and this is what? This is a Jordanian territory. On the other hand, this is Gaza Strip. This is a Egyptian territory. Similarly, if we are looking at the top, so this is the Syrian territory that has been captured. Now, this is also the area which is the catchment area of Jordan River. So if we have catchment area, what happens? This is naturally a desertified area. So if we find catchment area, what happens? We are able to get more fertile plains, and we are able to get some water. When we are looking at the West Bank is on the west of the Dead Sea. That is why it is called West Bank. It is not touching the Mediterranean Sea, but Gaza is touching the Mediterranean Sea. Golan is completely isolated, landlocked. Now, when we are looking at West Bank, again, this was part of the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, just after creation of Israel. And the West Bank was captured by Jordan, but it was again recaptured in the 6-day war. And since then, it is under Israeli occupation. And its capital, its de facto capital is Ramallah, which is also the de facto administrative head or capital of Palestine. And again, here more than 26 lakh people are living. That means these 3 regions, that is Golan, West Bank, Gaza, becomes important. Then we have the Haifa port here. Then we have the Mediterranean Sea. Lastly, we have the port of Eilat here, the Gulf of Aqaba, and here we also have Sinai Peninsula, and beyond Sinai Peninsula, what do we have? We have the Suez Canal. So all these important pointers become important for the prelims exam. Thank you so much. I hope it helped.